we'll do a review of Lekutei Sichos in Chelek Yudches, volume 18, the third Sikha of the Parshas Korach. In this Sikha, the Rebbe goes through the specific ideas. What exactly was the machlokes with Korach? How does it fit with the two punishments that it seems that were meted out? One, the swallowing, that they were swallowed into the ground, and the other one that they were burnt by the fire. How does it match up? The Rebbe has, initial thoughts, and he rejects that. And the Rebbe goes through by explaining that unity and the it seems like Korach's demanding that everybody should be together, nobody should be bigger than the other one, is actually the biggest machlokes. The Rebbe explains how, while everybody needs to be their own boundaries, the way Hashem set it up, but yet they need to be accepting from one another, and that's the real level of Shalom, as the Rebbe will explain. But first, the Rebbe begins to explore what is the measure for measure that the punishment that the Korach and the people that involved were punished fits the crime, what they did. Aleph. In Zeir Machlokes of Moshe and Aaron, on the disagreement that the Korach and his community had against Moshe and Aaron, Korach and his community were punished with two punishments. One, quoting from the pasuk, as kol ha'odom asher leKorach, all the people that belong to Korach and Dosam Babiram, including Dosam Biram, Zayin Nivla Gavorim, they were all swallowed up. Vayerdu heim v'chosher lahem chayim shoila. They and all that belonged to them went down alive into the Sha'ol. What happened to the 250 men that offered the ketubos? They were burnt. So you have the swallowing of the rest of the community of Korach and the 250 that were burnt. Says Yodua, it is known as the Einshim Vaskumen Milmailo, that the punishments that come from above, Zainen Me'ein from the Maisa Ha'aveda, was der Mensch tut, that is similar to the act of the sin that the person does. Ubelashon Chazal, using the language our sages of blessed memory use, B'midah Sha'odam Moided Ba Moidedim Loi, with the measure that a person measures with it, that's the way they measure with him. So in other words, what you do is what the punishment fits the act that he does. So that is true according to all opinions. While there is a difference of opinion, whether afilu loiderdeya, even according to the opinion, that when we have reward and there is punishment, they are not a result, a consequence of the mitzvahs avedus. Even according to that opinion that it's not a consequence, it's just like happens to be that just Shem chose it in such a way that that would be the punishment, that this would be the reward. But still, it goes measure for measure. So what Hashem chooses as a punishment is still has a connection to why it was chosen. Why was it chosen? This to be the reward, to be the punishment. But how much more so, for sure, according to the opinion. The activities they can receive from that the reward and the penalty are as a natural consequence from the act of the person. So the natural consequence has to be fitting to what they did, because that means that it's naturally, that brings it as a result as a consequence of what they did. So these punishments need to sort of fit be either a consequence or some connection, a measure for measure. So we need to understand what kind of a connection, what kind of a comparison is there in the Enshim for Sreifin, for Sreif of Belia to Zerchet to Began? These punishments of burning and being swallowed up, how are they connected to their sin and the blemish, which is the machlokes of Moshe and Aaron? This was the argument, the discord against Moshe and Aaron, and that was the sin. So how does swallowing in the ground and burning of the 250 makrivik Torahs, how does that fit? So the Rebbe is going to try to say that perhaps maybe the fire is a consequence because they brought fire, Torahs, and therefore, measure for measure, they were burned because that has to do with fire. But the Torahs was, the Rebbe argues, was a instruction by Moshe. There's a result that's not the direct argument against Moshe. The direct argument against Moshe was the sin. That was sort of another step. So the measure should be for the sin. Let's look inside of the argument. Base. Benegeya zum Einish Habliya beyerdu goyim Chaim Shoylo. So first, the Rebbe is going to address that perhaps the swallowing is associated. So, Voltman gekent masber sein bepashtus. The Rebbe in a minute is going to explain the same thing by the fire. But as far as the swallowing, how does this measure for measure? How is the swallowing a measure for measure for the machlokes of Korach? That instead, that Korach and his community, they argued against the appointments that Moshe Rabbeinu, as also Moshe's kol hamaisim b'libai, that Moshe did all what he's done. He made it up. He did it from himself. And they had a purpose that through this machlokes, this agreement and fight with Moshe, they wanted to become elevated. They wanted to get kahuna, which is the level of isnasus. They were looking to become big, chulu, raised. The nidrig givorn. So the consequence, the measure for measure, is that they wanted to become big, so they were lowered. They were degraded. Until they descended alive into the Sha'oil and Oynish from Tachlis HaYirida. A punishment which is the total descent. So it's measurement. They wanted to elevate themselves. They wanted to become Kohanim. And in the end, they are going to go even lower. That's what we're going to say is by the Aliyah. That's how it fits the measure. Well, that is in the Menush HaSreifa. Similar, we're going to say by the punishment of Sreifa. But Pashta Ksubim is mashma. From the simple reading of the verses, it appears as the Menush HaSreifa is gekumen to lead their pu'ula for Akrovas HaKeteres. That the penalty, the punishment, that they were burnt came because of what they did. They brought the incense. And the incense is associated with fire. With Baal, the dos is given an Eish Zora. Since this was a strange fire, because they weren't really, because they seien doch nid given Kohanim. They weren't Kohanim, so that fire that burns the Keteris is really a strange fire. So as a result, measure for measure is ve'esh, the fire is, therefore, ve'esh yotzeh beis Hashem v'teichel good. So the fire came from Hashem and consumed. Aber es ist nicht in ganzen verstanden. This is not fully understood. The Ketores hat doch Moshe ze geise makriv sein. Moshe is the one who instructed them to bring the Ketores. Yes, what was the purpose? Moshe told them to bring Ketores. Hey, Emes, yeah, it's true. As those who Gedaftar is bringing them birur, this was supposed to bring out that clarity, sort out from Vo'ish, Asher Yivchar Hashem HaKodesh. That the man that God chooses is the Holy One, the Kulchem Oivdim, and you'll all be lost. It's supposed to prove the righteousness of Moshe, of his choosing Aaron, that he is the, and everybody gets lost. So it had the goal of helping prove the leadership and the role of Aaron as the Kohen Gadol. Is the Chaber in them l'chayrin nitoken shaykh to their ikrachet, but that really doesn't have a connection with their main sin. Their sin wasn't the Ketores, their sin was they were machlokes and Korach. Zeyer machlokes, this that discord, the fight that they had. We es wird mudgash in dem pasuk gufa, as the pasuk itself says, la'achar srifosim, after they were burned, it says that hachatoyim elu b'nafsheisom, these are the sinners, they sinned with their soul. Not because they burned the fire. They sinned with their soul means what? Was this meant Rashi teaches shenasu poishim b'nafsheisom. They became rebellious sinners by their soul. Shenechleku HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that they argued against Hashem. The machlokes. So that was the sin, not the bringing of the Eish Zorah. That wasn't the main issue around here. Here the issue was arguing against the Kahuna, arguing against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So how is that burning associated with the argument against HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Maybe associated to the detail of the Ketores that they brought in order to verify that Moshe Rabbeinu used them, but that wasn't the main thing. So that's not a punishment on what the pasuk says. They were getting the punishment because they were b'nafsheisom, chatoim ha'elu b'nafsheisom, or not. Furthermore, the Eibishter od yeheisen as mezol von zeire machtis machen. He says that they should make from these pans that the 250 people used to put the incense in there to bring the Ketores. So the Eibishter instructed they should make rekuei pachim tzipul hamizbeach. They should bang down these metals, the pans, into sheets of metal to cover the mizbeach. And what's the purpose? The pasuk says, "Bichdei zezol zayin." There should be as a remembrance. People should say, that these pans, these metals that are the covers for the Mizbeach, that came from those people that disagreed on the Kahuna. So it says clearly, this is all the sin that they disagreed with the Kahuna. Nothing to do with that they brought a fire and Eish Zorah. So if we should say that the reason they were burnt is they did such a terrible sin that they brought the burning Ketores, fell doch der Iker in them ois. So then the main thing is in this sign, what we're making over here is to remember that they fought in the Korach as the Einish is the far was nechlecho. That the punishment that they're getting is for the disagreement. There is no sign in the Musman Zogun, so we have to say That means that we're missing over here. The main sin was you're making an ois for that they disagreed, but that's not really what we need the ois for. According to the shot that the punishment comes because they were bringing a fire, where's the ois for that? That needs a sign because that was the sin. Muslims sagen, so therefore you have to say, as the oynesh for nisr for gufa, that this, the fact that we're burned, is not just for the bringing of the ketoides, but the nisr for tashayches zum zikoron, that just the burning represents and reminds us that they should say that these were from those that disagreed in the kahuna. So there is an association between the burning and the machloikis of the kahuna. Not because of not just because of that, that's the association. When you understand, so what's the connection? What's the connection between burning and machloikis hakuna? So, but basically what the Rebbe is saying over here is that we have to find a connection between the fact that they were burned with their fighting against the kahuna. And you can't say because of the bringing an Eish Zara, that's why the burning is, because otherwise there's no ice over there. So otherwise that's only a side point. And also in the lowering, that they went down into the Shoel also needs a clarification. Similarly, we also need to explain, it requires explanation as far as the punishment of being swallowed. The Fihanal, based on the explanation above, that they wanted to be raised and they got punished to be lowered, is that so what is the main emphasis? Is in the detail that they descended and everything that's them alive, all the ways into the Sheol, into the abyss, all the ways into the ground. So alive in Sheol, that's the punishment of the descent, as opposed to their sin of trying to raise themselves to God. But from the flow of the verses, and also the Midrashim of our sages of blessed memories, Mashma, it appears as Ikira Einish is Bashtanen in the Prat from Leah, that the main punishment is just being swallowed up with the Loshen Razal, Bluye. Because that they were swallowed. It's not the descent, and it's not that they descended Chaim, the extent of the descent versus Hisnasus, but rather just the Bluye itself. The Rebbe is going to bring out how the punishment of Belia and the punishment of the fire is directly, as what the Rebbe explains, is directly punishments for the concept of this machloikis of Korach, as we'll see later on. Further, the Rebbe asks another question now, that was the Medrash Zog, we also need to understand, the Medrash states, as Korach loko Yosem Mekulo, that Korach got beaten more than all of them, because he got Shenisrav v'Nivla. He was burnt, both. He was burnt and he was swallowed. Why was both of these judgments meted out to Korach? Because had he just been burnt and not been swallowed, so then those who were swallowed would have a complaint. But even if they would say, the one who caused all of this punishment was Korach. They are being swallowed and Korach is being saved. He's not with them. And the same thing is had he been absorbed, swallowed in the ground and not burned. So then those that were burned would have an argument, complaint, but even they would say, But the one who brought the punishment was Korach. But is rough, and they're being burnt. Who Nitzal, and he's being saved. That's why he was judged with both of these deaths. That's what it says in the Medrash. But why did they say that he's being saved? Maybe they can say he gets another kind of punishment. But even if he wasn't judged by that particular punishment, why would they say that he's being saved? He's getting another punishment. Even if he was just judged with one death, and even if we would assume that those who got punished with the other death, they thought, hey, he's getting away. But getting away would not mean totally getting away, would just mean getting away easier. Why did they say nitzal? So maybe if, let's say, those who got the other punishment would have thought, they held Ados is nit genug, that's not sufficient, they got a more serious punishment. But they couldn't still argue that Korach is being saved. He still gets another point. But over here it seems that he's totally saved. So now we're going to go away on an explanation. What is the machlokes Korach? And on one hand, Korach seemed to argue that there should be unity, and his argument of unity caused all the machlokes. How is that explained? That those verstehen behagdim habir. So we'll understand by introducing an explanation. Was is verstanden the nekuda for machlokes Korach? What was the point of Korach's argument? Korach's time is given, and Korach's argument was the entire community are all holy, and God is amongst them. Why do you raise yourself and make yourself higher than the community of Hashem? Basically, what was the complaint? Everybody is holy. Why should you hold yourself on a higher level? Das heißt, which means, he didn't want there should be any differences amongst Jews. And for sure, there should not be kenisnasus from ein id of another id. Nobody should be higher and raised over another Jew. Was das meant lifidaite? This meant, according to his mind, he thought, as by Yid zol sein Achdus, that means by the Yid there will be unity there. Zogt aber Teure, so Teure, however, states, as the Taino and Anhoga from Korach is God the Heker von Achdus, that this argument and this conduct of Korach is the total opposite of unity. This is machlokes. Korach promoting, thinking in his mind this is unity, is actually the quite opposite of unity. This is machlokes. With the Targum, the Targum translates by Yikach Korach to be spelling. He separated, he argued. Korach, that's what Korach did. Bis as es wird close in machlokes. Still, Korach becomes the general idea, the symbol of machlokes. Kol ha-machlok machzik ba-machlokes over the law. Anyone who supports machlokes violates a prohibition. So Korach is the machlokes, is the symbol of machlokes, not to be like Korach and his community, and that is the law. It would seem how does it come that he is demanding that there should be unity amongst Yidden? So ver machlokes, this should make machlokes. And not just a regular discord, but on a machloikis and oifun garua, but in a terrible way machloikis. Bis as jeder machloikis was ken sein by Eden. Anytime there's a disagreement by a Jew that it's possible to be a machloikis, is verbunden mit machloikis Korach, is associated with the machloikis of Korach. Hey. So the Rebbe explains that in Moshe Rabbeinu's response, if we understand what are the boundaries that Hashem set up, how the boundaries are supposed to relate to each other, and then we'll be able to understand how Korach, while claiming unity, was actually doing just the opposite. Hey, the beer in them is Berumas in the Menfer from Moshe Rabbeinu. It's hinted in Moshe Rabbeinu's response. In the morning, God will let know. So the word, it does wird abgeteilt the Medrash, the way it is translated in the Medrash. When Rashi brings this Rabbi Pirushal HaTorah, Rashi records this in his commentary on the Torah. Omar lahem Moshe said to them, Moshe says to the Korach people, God has set boundaries in the world. Can you mix day into the night? There's a boundary of day and night. This is what the pasuk says at the beginning. Vayi erev, vayi boker. There was evening and there was morning. God made a separation between the light and the darkness, and therefore God has separated the Jews from the non-Jews. And just like He separated day from night, He's also separated Aaron. God separated Aaron to sanctify, make him holy of holy. If you have the ability to hold back, to prevent that separation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu separated between day and night, that's the way then you can do battle this. He says, take a look, morning, the difference between day and night, you can't disturb that. And just like you can't do mix up those boundaries, you cannot mix up these boundaries. And God has made Levi, the Aaron, on the Kohen Gadol, distinguished him like Disha Kodesh Kadosh, make him to the Kohen. Abdul Aaron like Disha Kodesh Kadosh. That's Barim Mizeh. So what's the explanation? Hashem created the world 10 saying, 10 limited, defined sayings from which the world was created. 10 sayings. It wasn't just one mish, one word. It's 10 sayings. The riber is the bria in an oifun, and therefore the creation is in such a way from Gvulis Chelek HaKadosh Baruch Hu Be'ilomei. God set up limitation boundaries in this world. As I said, that there is a distinction, a separation of levels in the created being. Different levels. Not all is one. Different levels in the creation. Every created being has its boundaries, its limitations, with which he separates, distinguishes, and he's separate from that from a second nivra. There's different, everyone is different shaped boundaries for each one, each created being. Punkt in the Gevulis in the Zmanim, just as there is these boundaries in the times from Erev Aboiker, from the evening and the daytime, that every time has its own idea, its own purpose. When everybody individually accomplishes sein Tafkid, it's their purpose, their job, based on the limitation, the definition and the limitations from his time, the evening and the day, then you may have one day. One day becomes when the day and the night, each one does their purpose. Likewise, it's also with regards to the service and the obligation and the mission of every created being. Tachlis v'shleimus habriya, what is the wholesome and the purpose of creation, is durch dem was jeder nivra firtoi sein tafkid, is through every created being accomplishing their mission to welchen is mashachen geworden, for which he was created. In sein bestimmte hagdora v'agbola, in that designated definition and limitation and boundaries. Each one has their boundaries, their mission, and which they need to accomplish. That's the purpose of their creation. When a created being does not accomplish his purpose, his mission, based upon what his is supposed to, his manners and his definition, what he's supposed to do, nor tut the avodah was bestimmt geworden for he does the work that has been designated for another created being, is a goyim a bilbul in the sidre breish. So then you cause confusion in the order of creation. That's not your avodah. Day and the nighttime, each one has to do their thing. You can't have people doing other things. And now we're going to see that in various different aspects, in the world, in the year, in people, there are boundaries and limitations which each one needs to be separated, and each one needs to do their thing. And when they do their thing, that's when it becomes the fulfillment of their purpose and the fulfillment of creation. That's what brings the real unity. But just as there are these boundaries and distinctions in the created being himself, there's also similar into the light of Kedusha which Hashem brings into creation, which means that inyan from the Maila Mehabriya versus in der Briya, the idea that is that which is above creation that comes down into creation. The light of Kedusha that Hashem brings into the world, there too, there are differences. Asizdo ha'yischalkus in the Dargis HaKedusha, that there is a separation on the different levels of Kedusha. The Kedusha that is brought into this world comes down in a way that there is separate levels of the Kedusha. And in each one of these three levels, Olam in the world, as we'll see in the world, there is different. There's Yerushalayim, there's Kedesh, Beis Hamikdash, the whole world. There is Shana in the year, Yom Kippur, and then you have the rest, Shabbos, and the rest of the days, and then Nefesh, the Kohen Gadol, and then other people, which is abbreviation of Olam Shana Nefesh, Osher. They come down in all these three parts. And Rabbi is going to explain that. First of all, Sizdodi is Chalkus in Olam. In Mokkah. First, about in space. There is the way it's in space. The Mishnah, Rechantois, some of the Mishnah enumerates the Esser Kedushas in Eretz Yisrael. Within Eretz Yisrael, it counts 10 steps, levels of holiness. Zul Mailam is one higher than the other. Al derech zeh is doin shona. Also, we have in Zman, in time, the Yemei Sachoil, weekdays, Yom Tov, Shabbos, and Yom Kippur, Yom Kippur. That the nefesh, and likewise also in the soul and people, in the Shamas Yisrael, in the souls of Israel. The Dugma, the Chalukah Klol is from Amat Lisa to separate the generally a people that are divided into three parts: Kohanim, Levim, Yisraelim, the Kohen of Israel. When in Kohen and Gufa, within Kohen, you have a Kohen Hedjit. And then there's the Hechster Darga from Kohen Gadol to the highest level, which is the high priest, the Kohen Gadol. And then you have the Chalukah from the Tzensur Gemayin. There's this division of the 10 categories by Yid, the Rashechem, Shiftechem, as the Pasuk enumerates it. The heads of the tribes, until the wood chopper, Unshoyim and Mecha, the one who draws the water. There's still 600,000 Yid. So there's all these distinctions. Okeshem vidosis in the Nivroim Atzma, just as it is in those that were created themselves. As then Hagar is that what is the proper, the desired conduct is Shalo Yishanu Estafkidom, they shouldn't change their jobs, their missions, their appointments. As yet, the Nivres for that every created being should accomplish their specific mission. Only them tafkid not the job, the mission of another created being. Was those bring the matzah for shalom in the bria? That brings wholesomeness, a situation, a piece of the bria. Vidos is in the Nogah Welt Kipshute. As we see how do you have running the world in the simple level? Asholom or Achdus herrscht dan when einer is nicht massig. When could there be peace and unity when one person does not infringe, take away from somebody else's territory? Nicht loichem miteinander, doesn't wage war with the other person. To take for himself that which belongs to the other person. Then you have peace. So that's in the way of the world of the creation. But the derech zeh is just in madreges hakadusha. Similar, it's also in these steps in the level of kedusha. As sholem is through them. When do we get peace? It's through this versus the talking asokus gvul v'isnagdus. When there is no infringing into the territory or opposition from ein madrege kegen hatzveiter, from one level against the other. In all three aspects, in olam shana v'nefesh, in the world, space, in the year and time, and in people and nefesh. But each one finds itself in its own boundaries and its own matter that is designed for it specifically. So Rebbe is going to add now, so this, that everybody lives together, that nobody infringes and that nobody takes away from the other, that is shalom, but that's yet not the ultimate shalom. The ultimate shalom is that there should be a relationship, not a separation between that relationship, that they take from each other, that they live, that everybody contributes something from one to the other. Zayin. But this is doch nicht der Matze von Emes Shalom. This is not yet the situation from true peace. But wie bald as jeder Darge is abgeteilt für sich, since every step is separated for itself, gefindt sich in ihrer Welt, it finds itself in its own world, und hat kein Scheiches nicht mit der Zweite, it doesn't have a connection with the other world, is das nifrodim. So they're separate. Es ken angerufen werden Sholem, Shem HaMushal. We can call it peace in a borrowed name. It's not the true Sholem. Sholem, they're not fighting. They're not waging war, so that's peace. That's a borrowed name of Sholem. But es ist nicht Sholem, This is not really peace, which means to complement each other, make up for each other. Ba'avdas and unity. It's not really shalom. True shalom is not that they're just not fighting, but that there is shalom with it. Amitis ina shalom is. True idea of shalom is when es is do hashpor v'hashloma ve'ein madrege zu der zweiter. When there is a flow and a makeup, a complement, that one complements one level from ein darge complements the other. Zusammen der mit, was jeder madrege hat ihr bestimmten Dinge. Together with the fact that each level has its specific aspect, that its distinct, its distinction is dot dash and yet there is the flow from one to the other. Similar to they call to each other the angel, which means they receive from each other, they share, they complement each other. Other for the hechere madreger in their nidriker, or that the higher level gives from its level to the lower level. As our sages say, the Beis Hamikdash, with regards to the Beis Hamikdash, the light comes out to the entire world. And Azoi is the Hashpor from Shabbos in the Sheshes Me'achel. That's the way the influence, the flow, Shabbos to the 6 weekdays. The Hashpor was the Kohen Gadol is Mamshech B'nai Yisrael. So you see, they impact each other. There's a difference between Shabbos and the weekdays, but the Shabbos impacts the 6 days. Gives it the flow from the Shabbos that comes into the weekdays. The Hashpor was the Kohen Gadol is Mamshech B'nai Yisrael. The flow that the Kohen Gadol extends to the Bnei Yisrael. Birchas Kahanim, the Kahanim give Mazevite. So that means when the higher level, the day of Shabbos, gives to the Me'achel, the Kohen Gadol, the Kohanim, they give to the other people. Also the other way around, that all the lower levels are also contributing to the higher levels. The Mishkan of Beis Hamikdash is nivne geworden. The Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash were, to begin with, they were built for nidvas kol echad ve'echad miYisrael, from the contribution of each and every one of the Jewish people. Azoi is oich de hamshochas ha'kedusha in Mishkan uBeis Hamikdash verbunden mit die Korbanos. So also that's originally when the Mishkan was built. Everybody contributed. How do you extend the kedusha in the Mishkan and Beis Hamikdash? It's associated with the Korbanos. Was Eden seine Magdish umbringen le Mishkan and Mikdash? That's what the Jews offer. They Magdish a korban and they bring to the Beis Hamikdash or Mikdash. So that means that contributing and making up the Mishkan, the Beis Hamikdash, same thing is in the level of year. There's a input. Nicht nur Kedushas Yom Tov is verbunden mit und is leferach Avodas Yisrael. Not only is the sanctity of Yom Tov, we know Yom Tov becomes by declaring when Rosh Chodesh is, so that Yom Tov goes on that day of the month. So it turns out that Yom Tov is designed and directly the input of the Yidden that makes the Yom Tov. So it's not only the Kedushas Yom Tov is verbunden mit, is tied and is leferach Avodas Yisrael, and goes relative to the service of the Yid, because the Yid has to make it up. The Baldas Yisrael, the Kachim Lizmani, it is the Yidden that make the time holy. They make Rosh Chodesh, they make Yom Tov. But when I get Shabbos, this is also for Shabbos. There's the input from the lower level, from the weekday. Zokman of them klal, you say klal, we say of this also the rule, Misha Torah be'erev Shabbos yechol b'Shabbos, that if you troubled yourself from before Shabbos to prepare the Shabbos, What is the inner, what the Pirush in there is? What is the inner meaning of this is? As Kedusha Shabbos by Ayid, that the sanctity of the Shabbos, an experience of a greater sanctity, is when you invested something in it in the weekdays. The weekdays have a direct impact through the person's work, what he puts in, the Tircha B'Erev Shabbos. As the Kedusha Shabbos by Ayidin is better, that the experience, the sanctity of the Shabbos by a Jew is more. So when he troubles himself and he works in the 6 weekdays, is better. If it's a greater trouble, there's a greater Shabbos. So you see how the weekday impacts the Shabbos, the level of Shana. In space, you see that the Mishkan, which is in space, the oldest place, is impacted by the matters that are outside of the Mishkan and the Mikdash, other things to make them holy, to bring the korbanos. By the year, you see that it's the weekdays that add to the Shabbos. Ubenefesh, the same thing is by the soul. The Gemara zog benegei hakoyin. The Gemara says, as far as a koyin, the ki dashto, you make him holy. Dashto means you have to honor him. But it really means that you make him holy, that the holiness of the koyin he gets from the Yisrael that make him holy. The Gemara zog benegei hakoyin. The Gemara says, regards to hakoyin, the ki dashto, the chol dover shebi kedusha. You have to sanctify everything that is kedusha. Liftoyach Rishon, he gets to be the first one to start. Levorich Rishon, he gets to first one to make the bracha. The little money of Rishon, he gets the first good portion. He gets the honor, everything first. But Shesh Loimar, we can say, like the Pashtus Haloshim, the Kidashtoi, the simple meaning Kidashtoi, as Miz Moisif in the Kedusha from Koyen Dur them Yisrael. That you are adding the Kidashtoi. You are adding to the sanctity of the Kohen through the Yid. You make him holy. Ados is need nora'iyan from covet. It's not just you giving him honor. Mishum darki sholem, for ways of peace, give him first. Noran hogev was his verbunden. When you do that, you give him that you're adding to the kedusha. Mitoy sofa binyan kedusha. This is connected to the level of kedusha. The kiddush. So how does this all take place? Das alam is b'shas is though. The mechitza v'havdola zwischen the darkness. It's all when there is a separation, a partition, and a separation between these levels. Aber jeder is mashpia the zweite. Separation, but each one gives to the other. The bigger to the lower, and the lower to the bigger. Each one gives something to the other. And in that way, you really get peace. Because giving to each other is not just that you're separate, but you are complementing and helping and becoming, each one giving something to the other. Ches. Through this, you reach to the highest level of peace. To the ultimate wholesomeness and completion from all levels together. The Alter Rebbe is Mevarev and Klal Yisrael. The Alter Rebbe explains about the Jewish community in general. As Kulam Tzrichim Zelazeh, we all need one another. Kol Yisrael Kemach Shleimo, and all Yidden are one story together, a whole structure. Pung Vidas is the most of the just as take an example, the way it is as far as the limbs of the human body. That every limb has a certain characteristic and a special advantage, which is important, and brings benefit to the andere, to other limbs. Every limb is useful for all the other limbs. So that's why it's also the example of the Jewish people, as the language of the Alter Rebbe. Say, for example, a person who is height, a man of height, Rosh has a head, Raglaim has feet. Sha'af Sheraglaim Ein Seifa Madrego Lamata. Even though that the feet are the end of the step and they're below. Barosh Oel Yenuma and the Rosh is on the top, and it's the most elevated in the middle. The head and the feet, the head and the head, compare the feet to the head is much higher. But yet, in one level, in one aspect, there is an advantage and a mile for the feet. You need to walk with them. And also, not only walking, they are the one that stand up. They raise, they stand up the body of them. And also, further, if there is a heaviness in the head, you let blood in the feet and the person's healed. And then you receive your vitality from the foot. The head receives from the foot. Turns out there is no wholesomeness to the head without the feet. Likewise, all Jewish people are like one structure, like one body. Everybody needs each other, and everybody brings something to the table. And without the other one, you're not complete. That's in the human body. Similar, it's in the world. As the shleimus for the hechster madreges for the Esser Kedushas, the wholesomeness of the highest of these 10 Kedushas is when Esser Kedushas, when there's 10. When there's all 10 Kedushas, then the 10th is the highest. But you need the 10th to be the highest. The same thing is in the year. The Ganzkeit und Shleimus in Hashana. When is there a wholesomeness in the idea of a year? Is when in the year you have all weekdays. And you have Shabbos, and the Shabbos on Yom Tov. The Dugma, Vidosis Kipshute Bechitzonius, similar to the way it is literally external. We see the Vashana is Maloshin Shinui, it changes, Unsheni, and second, Ayor, or repeat, change and repeat. Ayor, a year is made up, is set up from all 4 seasons with all of the changes. That makes up the year. So how do you have a whole year? Only if you have all parts of the year, not just Shabbos and Yom Tov. Was that you one of them in them in Hasholem Vavdus? Now we understand this idea of peace and unity. Like from all details, you make up one full entity. So now it's important their limitations. How could you make up one? Is when each one has their boundaries, chilukim, divagdoris, and definition. Vorim is achdus als mitzias achas lingum. This unifying to make it one whole, complete entity. Sayin olam, whether it's in the world, space. Sayin shana, whether it's the year, time. Sayin nefesh, whether it's in the people. Shaft davke. That's how does it made up? How is it created? Mitzad zeir is chalchus al prot, because of their distinctions at different details. Nit mitzad dem teichen Hashem b'kul, not for their common idea, but it's their distinction, each distinction. V'mezetos in gufa odom, as you see it in the human body. As when can man sagen, das ist ein ganzer schlimmes dicker Kuf? When could you say that this is a whole body? Specifically when you have all distinctions for Rosh, Kuf v'regel, when it has the head, the body, and the foot, that is a whole person. It has to have all 248 limbs, which is Agidim Shonim, and the 365 various sinews which make up the person. So now the Rebbe is going to explain that this is all the way the light of Kedusha comes into the world, which is Asora Mamoris, is a level of Ischalkus definition. But from the perspective of above, there actually is no Chilukim. And that was one of the things that the Rebbe is going to explain in his Yud, that Korach was a pikach because he saw it the way it was Lemaila, which is a perspective that he wanted below, but below you can't have that level of Achdus that is from above, which things aren't separate to begin with. That's not in this world, which Nivra Basora Mamos. Let's look inside. Test. That Inyan for Sholem and Achdus in the Dreibekindes and all, this concept of Sholem and unity in the above three levels is nor b'shayches to the Bria. That only how it relates to creations. Also the spiritual worlds, but that's all created. Since the world was created with 10 sayings, was der Far is close for That's why the world is generally put together from a lot of different pieces. The 10 sayings create that multiplicity, which the world makes the world up into a world from all these different things. And therefore is Kedushin Olam Shana Nefesh. So the light of Kedusha, which comes down to the world Shana Nefesh, does haste, which means as it extends into time and place, the Earth Kedusha was signing together from his which are within the definitions of these divisions and changes. Always gestalt in the Ischalkus, that's why it's set up in that distinction from Eser Kedushas of 10 Kedushas. Eser Madrigis, 10 steps. The Chetzel stellen zusammen, ein Schleim is the Keninyan. They put together, they make up one wholesome idea. The Kedusha from the Eberstein in the world, Hashem's Kedusha in the world. So that is the perspective, that's where the light comes down, the Eira Kedusha in the world. Oh, but the Eira Kedusha is Mitzad Atzmei, but the way the level of light of Kedusha is on its own. Unochech and higher Bishosh in its source. Lamaila, higher and higher. So in itself and in its source, which is higher, Biz in Atzmusi, but telling the blessed essence of Hashem. Plus is Muvshat from Yadam Gedem Toyer, which is shaped, it's undressed of any definition, any description. Is dort nicht shaykh der ganze Geder Shalom is Achdus. Over there, there's entire definition of peace and unity. That Ebrister Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hu, Hashem blessed is Achdus Apshuta, is true unity, simple unity. Hashem is just unity himself. Und euch die Achdus, so also that level of unity that is beyond the world, is poil und setzt sich in der Kedusha now, that also impacts. And you can see it in the Kedusha of above that we talk about, from Olam Shana V'Nefesh, in the world, in the time of the year, and in the soul. In Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the Holy of Holies, over there we see Mokum Oren Einem Min Hamida, that the space of the Oren did not take up any space. It's not part of the measurement. Didn't take up anything. It was in space. It was 2.5 amas. It had the size, but yet when you measured it from side to side, it didn't take up any space. As Mokum Guf is the Mailam and Mokum. The space itself is beyond space. But that is only from Atzmi says no. Then you have it in Shona, in the year. Yom Kippurim. Was it Achaz Bashona? It's once a year. Und in Nefesh, there's only one Kohen God. Und durch der Knisse from Kohen Gadol Yom Kippurim and Kodesh HaKadosh. When the Kohen Gadol on the highest one in the Nefesh, and in the highest time of the year in Yom Kippur, and in the highest place in Kodesh HaKadosh, is a mamshich dem inyan hasholem v'hashlemus. He brings down the idea of peace and wholesomeness. Unochacher and higher bees agdus avshuta till the simple unity. In the madreges from Eden was designing in the protestic into the steps, the levels of Yidden, as they are in their specific levels of Kedusha, he brings down that essence of Achdus through that experience of the Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol going into the Kodesh HaKadosh. So now we'll understand what was going on a little bit. What Korach says was a smart. It seems like he was smart that he did have some idea over here. Like this, to understand, our sages tell us, since Korach was so smart, he was open. What did he see fit to do such a foolishness? To fight with Moshe Rabbeinu? Because from Loshen Shepika Choya says that he was smart. So we never heard that Korach was smart. It appears we haven't heard, we haven't studied Korach's wisdom till now. When it yet never heard it, is mashmas. It appears as Gufa that from here itself, based on that he was smart. Still he's saying, why did he do such a foolishness? As in the Pikhish is in his smartness, there is mixed in the idea of foolishness. That's buried them. What's the explanation? What does it mean when a person is smart, is open, is intelligent? Is Virazal Zog, the sages of Blessed Memory tell us, one who is wise sees the future. As nit nor them unplucked tell from us. It's not only that you see the revealed part of an item, nor euch the behaltenen primis die Teuchen von der Sache. You also get to see the hidden and inner meaning content of the idea. You're a chochem, you don't just see what's on the surface, but you see what's inside, below the surface. Because that's only going to be seen later on. You can see it. It means like this. The time from Korach on this argument of Korach, the whole community is holy, but Hashem is amongst them. Why do you raise yourself above the community of Hashem? As is the talking order this chalkus by Yidden, that there's no room for division amongst Yidden, is mitzatzai chochma pichas. That is because his wisdom, because he can see the way things will be in the future. He saw the peace and the unity as it's in its roots. Which in the talking chilukim, where there is no differences, nor blois achdus apshuta. There's only simple unity. The source, it's now. In the world, it'll be revealed in the future to come. The peace and the unity of the world, we will get that level of sholem v'avdus as it is, because as it's in the source. We state, as it's written about the time of the future. There will be nobody teaching one another. Everybody will know Hashem. There's not going to be different levels. That was the pichas, that he could see the way it's in its source, the way it's going to be the future. But yet that was a foolishness. That was a foolishness. For Mazah Amiti Subshuta, such a true and simple unity can only be in the root and in the future to come. As opposed to now below. When the time when we need to do mitzvahs. Now is the time to do it. Is Azah and Hoga, such a conduct, not only is it not unity and peace, but on the contrary, this is machlokes. This is machlokes. Why? So Rebbe explains now. Yudalef, the beer was it. Shasas mezogt kol ha'ilo kulim kedoshim. When you say that everybody is holy, as the kedusha is ba'alman gleich, that equal by everybody, the holiness is equal. Und der Far ken oicha Yisrael, and that's why you're going to say even a Israelite who's not a kohen, not a kohen. Arang in the Beis Hamikdash, to enter into the Beis Hamikdash, makriv zayin korbanos ketores, to offer the korbanos the ketores, is if Baldos is not madrega, since that's not his level, or no even about that's not his service. Part from them is palig, that brings a separation. The nitzuz boireliki, that spark of Hashem, that godly spark of godliness, which is was is that is by every yid. Was mitzad them is that oich mekabel the hashpah, and for that, because of that spark, he also receives the flow from kedusha, kohen gadol, from the sanctity of the kohen gadol, through the service of kohen gadol, comes through that spark from every yid. That is his pali. If you go in directly, that is removed above. For the madrege protis from them eden can not vernehmen the madrege nailis kedusha. That detailed level of a yid cannot tolerate that great level of kedusha. And his individual created spark, individual descends and gets absorbed below. The belief cannot go up. It loses itself. That spark that you have, it's kedusha. You need to receive from the kohen gadol. But if you're going to try getting directly, it's not your avodah. You lose it. It descends. Similar is by the Yidden in general. If there is no raising of over the community Hashem, as fell the mechitzas amavdilos, if you are lacking those boundaries that separate tzvishim kahanim levim Yisraelim, between the kohen and levim Yisraelim, and tzvishim kohen gadol sharaom, and between the kohen gadol and the rest of the people, we need that separation. Was davkin mitzad the mechitza veherdol is do yetz the shtem shom v'achdus. It's because there is that boundaries, there is the partition, there is the separation. That's why we have Shalom and Achdus, is because we have each one in their level. As ein madreg is mashpit to the zweite one gives to the other one. And durch dem sein alle mashlim and tzir kohen b'klos Yisrael. And that's why we all complete together the full human structure, the structure of Jewish people. So then, when there is not like, so if you don't have that, that brings about the discontent and the separation amongst the Jews. The Aliyah, the Stalkus, from the Elyonim Shaba'am, and the Yerida from the Chteinim Shaba'am. The elevation and the removal from those that are higher of the people, they're removed higher, and the descent from the lower of the people. When you don't have the real peace, when you don't have these separation complementing each other. When their meet, your base is move on with the ancient for Sreifa B'liyah Zayin Mida Keneged Mida. That's where we understand how the burning and the swallowing are measured for measure as the Rebbe began the Sikha. Keneged the Machloikis, they all correspond to the sin of Machloikis. But Zebeda Ke'echad, because both of them as one, Drikin Oiz them Pilug Upirud, Histalkus Viri, they both express the separation, the discord, the discord, the elevation and the descent. Durch Sreifa, through burning, Ber de Kiloim, Histalkus from the Hechere, Un Eidelere Telem from Dovranisov. When you burn something, that brings to the Kiloyim, the loss and the removal of the higher parts, these more refined parts of the thing that is being burned. Ondur Blia, that brings from the nidrik from the lower levels to burn. Which are not able, have no connection, they cannot be elevated above through burning. You can't bring them up, and that. So the lower things, the refined things of those that are burnt, go up in smoke, and the non-refined things and the blia, that is the lower parts, which cannot go up. This is oich masid the pashtus. This also fits simply in simple with the chilukim with the einshim and anoshim kipshuta, and the distinction and the punishment and those who were punished with it. Who was punished? The distinguished people were punished with burning, and the other people, the ordinary people, they were swallowed. Mitzreifa zayin nenesh gevoren, who was punished with burning? The Reishnun ish makri baktoides, 250 men that brought the ktoides. They were the leaders of the community. They were called to the meetings. Anshe Shem, people of stature. Anshe said, Rosh Hashanah. They were the head of the Sanhedrin. They were burnt. They were elevated. When the Einish from Belia is given, and who was swallowed? Soviv Dosam Avirim, those who circled, stood around Dosam Avirim. With all the other people that took. Even before this, they were low levels. The Tzeilt and the third Lifnei has related to it beforehand. About their sins, they were low people. Doesn't have the whole history. He says, if anyone goes from Rishoyim, the Torah calls them Rishoyim. So they had all kinds of bad history already. So they were swallowed in. High timer. For that reason is in the Einish Yordu Chaim Sha'ila. So in the punishment that they went down alive into the Sha'il, Mudgish that Inyan Habliya, over there the emphasis is not the descent, but they swallowed. The mitvat euch gemeint, here we also mean the nitzus hagedusha was doing the madrigas hatachtonim, that holy spark which exists in the lower levels, was durchum bittul for the mechitzes, through disrupting, negating those boundaries. It gets absorbed in the shoila. Gimel klippes atmeis into the three klippes atmeis. Ki dua benegayed in the tzutzes as gefinnen sich in klippes, as it's known with regards to those sparks that are in the klippes as the netzutze kedusha, that those holy sparks was from zeizayin and makabel chayis, the klippes atmeis, that they are the recipients, the klippes atmeis are received from them. They are sort of swallowed in. That's like swallowing the ground. They are swallowed. Those nitzutzes are swallowed. That's where they get the chitzon. Now, Pizayis move on. Now we also understand the other medrash. The medrash as Korach is next geworden with Beido Einshim, that he got both punishments with Sreifa or with burning and with swallowing it. But the Mokr v'Sheresh HaMachlokes, since he was the source and the root of the discontent of the war, the Machlokes, was when he persuaded everybody, the far, that's why his punishment also included in a very open way the Chalokim, the Ketzovis, and the Pilu, both parts and both extremes of this separation and this discontent. Had he only been punished with one of them, other Sreif, other Glia, either burning or swallowing, will given the time of Nitzel, that he saved that Solas Chelek Elyon. Either the upper part would have been saved, or that Solas Chelek Hatach, the lower part would be saved. Where the punishment of that separation did not touch, higher or lower. The Riber, That's why he had both punishments. That his soul, that higher part, that higher part of him is burned. The guf kayim tachtenim sheboy, his body stayed. That's the lower end. And then, while the soul was burned, and then he rolled till the place of the bluim, and that's where he was swallowed in. Yudalef. That means I wrote in Alice Manim my name. It's a lesson in all times, especially nowadays. Those that argue, because we have to keep peace and we have to bring people together. We should not be particular on the boundaries, the separations, and partitions. Was that Eibishter hat eingestellt in Welt that Hashem has set up in the world. Onhevendig, starting from the Romvar, from the Mechitza of Abdullah, start by throwing down the partitions and separation between men and women. Eidus beget the Kedusha to use as witnesses at a divorce or Kedusha. It's Harazayin Tzarminyan to add to a minyan as a weiter. They want to throw down these boundaries. Proven Shavan and Nervuvia, trying to create a mix-up in Das Ve'emuna, in our religion, in our belief, between Jews and to be separated, the nation of the world. A pirza, that would be a breach in the mechitza. That's a wall. That is a wall that separates. They want to breach it. How you see this should never take place. As they call it, so-called conversion, not against Allah, which is not according to Allah. That meant for Maise Korach. So you see from the story of Korach a lesson. As when that when God forbid you want to negate, take away, nullify those boundaries that Hashem has separated in His world. Is So in addition to the main thing, this is against the Torah of Moshe, Vazi's Torah Hashem, which is Hashem's Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu appointed. He was the one that they fought against, but it was the end. Yeah, Rashi brings they fought against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bringt man der mit nit kein Shalom. That doesn't bring peace. But for period of us, we bring a separation of hearts. Sachen was be'etzem sein is detailed. Things that are in essence separated. Or they go to Hepech or not only separate, they might be they're totally opposite one another. You cannot connect them. Nor side noch am Chitz, was is mafsed to say. You can connect them through this partition that interrupts them. That of Dugma, say for example, the Shaykhis Maimunesh. How could you connect water and fire? Can sein dafki when it's don't have six to be only when there is a separation, interruption. From der Gedere was the man in the pot that you have water, you can put it then under the fire. Anders is not only talking to us no chibur. Then there's no benefit to connect the fire and the water. Nor the chibur brings a bit legamni, but that connection brings a total negation for the mitzvahs and tzveiten. The water extinguishes the fire, and the fire dries out the water. Specifically, by holding on and strengthening these walls, these partitions, these boundaries, which Hashem has separated the world. Each one and one accomplishes their mission for which purpose God created them. That accomplishes peace. What says that needs to be between the different categories. That is a peace that is built on Torah. Was called all her passageways are peace. That is the real peace. And through this conduct of keeping the barriers, the peace that way, you merit to the time of there'll be no war, no jealousy and competition. which is the time of Mashiach. As with Kuma Mashiach, was with Zera David Shlomo, who is Mashiach, who is from the seed of David Shlomo, was of Shlomo state, it says regarding Shlomo, who here, Ish Menucha, he's going to be a man of relax. B'sholim b'sheker etin Yisrael b'yom. With peace and quiet, I will give on the Jewish people in his days. The Yidden will be separated from the nation of the world. The strangers will be there to serve and work. There'll be a different, there'll be zorim. And yet there will be peace. Sheikh will fix the world kuloi, the Avodas Hashem b'yachad, to serve Hashem together. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, because epech el amim sofa brura. Then I will turn to the nations in a very clear language. Likre kulam b'shem Hashem. Everybody will call the name of God. And to work with him in one shoulder altogether. This is B'sichas Shabbos Parshas Korach Tovshin Yud Zayin and Motzoi Shabbos Kodesh Yud Aleph Shvat Tovshin Lamed Aleph.